Hi, Woodstock chemistry students. I'm sorry I can't be with you today, but what I thought I would do is spend a few minutes just talking through the rubric on this upcoming assignment about predicting shifts in equilibrium. Okay, so you know what it looks like. It's this here, predicting shifts in equilibrium, and your job is to choose one of these things. Isopropyl alcohol or butane or ethanol. Take any one of them and make an argument based on evidence and reasoning about the impact of adding that material, that substance, to the purple cobalt solution. Okay? We said in class that you were going to make sure that you predict the resulting color. So is it going to go blue? Is it going to go pink? And speculate on the concentration needed to make that color change. So do you think that the material that you chose will have a big impact, in which case even a low concentration could work, or is it going to have a really kind of small impact on the color change, and therefore you would need a particularly high concentration? So that'll all be based on our important list of ideas that we came up with the other day in class and that are available elsewhere on the Google Classroom. Okay, so that's the basic idea. Let's dive down and take a look at the rubric. Okay, there's three parts to the rubric. You can see explanation / prediction up top, evidence and reasoning. If you've been looking at these carefully for the past several quarters, I've been trying to standardize on the language here, and my goal is to make sure that the sort of beginning, approaching, and proficient work is always described in the same way, so that you have some consistency in your work, and I've got some consistency in my assessment of your work, and so on. I think this is really kind of a noble goal, but it's hard to anticipate the various differences that might occur from assignment to assignment. So sometimes the language isn't perfect, and I think we might run into that a little bit here as we think about 1, 2, and 3, the beginning, approaching, and proficient descriptions. Okay, so let's get into that a little bit. Let's just look particularly at this sort of explanation / prediction. Okay, beginning says state the purpose of this investigation or the driving interest. So in our case, the driving interest is, I guess, to just sort of figure out, like, what do we think is going to happen when we add in, say, butane. All right. Approaching would be that you provide enough background information that you're really like laying the groundwork so your audience can follow along. That all seems to work out pretty well. I guess when I get to 3 and 4, it's a little bit more difficult to sort of make those really different from one another. And really what I'm trying to get at is, can you integrate your evidence and reasoning throughout the entire explanation, okay, throughout your entire writing. So that means that it's not broken up into pieces where one part says explanation, one part says evidence, and one part says reasoning, but rather it's one fluid narrative that you write. Okay, so 3 and 4 are not different in any way in this particular case. I couldn't figure out a great way to kind of describe what the 4 score would be in terms of the explanation or the prediction. However, there are a couple of things when it comes to evidence, if we move down here, where it would be, it's really helpful. Okay, so as we look at evidence, beginner would just be describing the source of the evidence, and approaching proficiency would be able to present that evidence effectively, so that the audience can understand you're thinking about it. Okay, now here's a dilemma. It says this may take the form of tables and or graphs, or other ways of organizing the evidence. And I highlighted the or other ways. We don't have evidence in this case of like data. I can't really think of a good way to kind of show that data, but we have a lot of background information about the individual materials like butane and isopropyl alcohol and so forth. We understand water really well. We understand the cobalt ion. We understand the cobalt ion forms, both the isolated cobalt and the cobalt tetrachloride. There's a lot of kind of background information that we are now taking for granted, and that would be your data. Organizing that may mean that perhaps you have a real visual element to your explanation, that you incorporate those images that I shared with you the other day in class as part of a really compelling argument. That's just one way of perhaps organizing that evidence, if you will, but I think there can be a lot of ways. I don't want to shortcut your creativity, okay? But it wouldn't be a table. It wouldn't necessarily be a graph. It would be some other way, okay? If we look at the proficient, I think most important idea here is right here, that you can analyze that by drawing out details that are not immediately evident. It may seem obvious to you that a certain connection can be made, but your reader is not going to necessarily make the same connection. So you want to make sure that what you see is what your reader sees. So take your time and make sure that your thinking becomes really transparent. Okay. And then, in addition, you can provide an appropriate interpretation of the data. Again, this is not numerical data in this case, but rather some your evidence of other materials, your evidence of the properties that we know are so important. Okay, and making sure that you're speaking about that in the right way. Okay, let's look at the 4 score. Then I'll take a quick little pause here. The 4 score is this, and this is unique. I try to make the 4 score unique to the assignment. So it says here that you can draw upon your knowledge of at least one other substance, like water or acetone or just about anything else, calcium chloride perhaps, to make important comparative statements. Okay. So you're going to choose something like butane or ethanol, and you're going to be trying to decide which way it goes. Does it go blue? Does it go pink? A really great argument will be to incorporate the ways that other materials act with this cobalt solution, and how your choice, say butane, compares or contrasts with that choice. Okay, so being able to kind of like compare it to something else that we know would be great. Okay, I'm going to take a quick little pause here for a moment and let you think about that. Okay, let's drop down here to the reasoning part of the rubric. You'll notice here that in virtually every case, maybe in every case, you'll see science principles, scientific principles as we go from beginning to approaching to proficient. Okay, so here's the place where you're going to draw upon some of the most important ideas that we know drive all this: charges, bonding, bond types, bond strengths, etc. Okay, but I think what makes this particular discussion really unique from many other arguments you might make that involve scientific principles, and that is that there is an essential role that randomness plays in these particular systems. Okay, we've been talking about that a lot during class. It's a little bit surprising in some ways, given that we often think of science as sort of a single input and a single output into a system. Here we're talking quite a bit about probabilities of things happening and randomness. Okay, so not that this is surprising at this point, but I think a really powerful argument is going to emphasize that role of randomness. Okay, so that's a tour through the rubric as you start to write this. Think about how you want to get to this, fourth column here. Okay, in terms of your evidence and reasoning in particular. Okay, those are important pieces to be thinking about, and you'll want to make sure that you can write with those goals in mind. Okay. All right, I'll take one more pause here, and we'll talk about one other thing before we'll be done. Okay, just a reminder here before we close out that I did provide for you images of water and ethanol and isopropyl alcohol and so on. Okay, and along with that, I've given you the chemical formulas and such. I would encourage you to copy and paste these. I don't know how much, I guess maybe you can rotate them. Looks like you can. Okay, so that's pretty great. So if you wanted to copy and paste and then rotate things to make an image, you've got everything you need right there in terms of, visual elements. Okay, so I want to encourage you to take advantage of those things and do your best work incorporating those. All right. We'll talk soon. I hope that you got a lot out of this, and I wish you luck. Okay, start early. Come see me if you get stuck. Bye.